The doorbell shattered the peaceful silence of my living room. I glanced at the clock, 8:45 p.m. on a Thursday. An unexpected visitor at this hour? Arthur looked up from his newspaper, his brow furrowed. "Were you expecting someone, dear?" "No, not at all," I replied, rising from my armchair. As I approached the door, my heart skipped a beat when I peered through the peephole. My son Jasper stood on the doorstep, hands shoved in his pockets, shoulders hunched forward. I hadn't laid eyes on him in over 3 years, not since the dreadful blowout that drove him from our lives. I unlocked the door and pulled it open, unable to find the right words. Jasper looked up at me with those familiar blue eyes, the ones that used to beam with youthful optimism. "Hello, Mother," he said flatly. "Jasper, what are you doing here? Can I come in?" A simple request, devoid of greeting or warmth. Arthur appeared behind me. "Well, I'll be." His tone made his surprise quite evident. I stepped aside, gesturing for Jasper to enter. My heart raced as he crossed the threshold, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. We settled in the living room, an uneasy quiet hanging over us. Jasper stared at his hands, almost as if he'd forgotten why he had come. Finally, he broke the silence. "I need help." Arthur scoffed. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up here after how you—" "Arthur, please," I interjected, raising my hand. As much as I wanted to echo my husband's sentiment, I knew driving Jasper away again would only breed more regret. I looked my son in the eyes. "What kind of help are you asking for?" Jasper swallowed hard. "Financial help. My business. We're in a bad way. If I don't get a cash infusion soon, I'll have to file for bankruptcy." My heart sank. Of course, this clearly wasn't a gesture of goodwill or an attempt to reconcile. Just like before, Jasper only came calling when he needed something. "You've got to be kidding me," Arthur blurted out. "After how you left us high and dry 3 years ago?" "Arthur," I started, but Jasper cut me off. "You're right, Dad," he said, finally meeting Arthur's fiery gaze. "I was a stupid, selfish kid back then, but I've learned my lesson. This business, it's my life. If it falls apart, I'll have nothing left." His words felt rehearsed, like a salesman's pitch, but his eyes, those blue eyes that had once been so full of promise, now they were hollow, desperate. "What do you need?" I asked cautiously. Jasper straightened his back. $200,000. The words hung heavy in the air. Arthur shot to his feet. "Absolutely not! Don't you dare entertain this, Marlene!" Jasper turned back to me, his expression unreadable. In that moment, I barely recognized my own son. Could I really trust the person sitting before me? Yet, what if this was his chance at redemption? What if, by shutting him out again, I ensured his failure? I knew Arthur would never approve, but a mother's hope runs deeper than any bank account. "Let me think it over," I said softly. That's a lot of money." Jasper simply nodded and stood up. "You know where to reach me. Thanks for your time." And just like that, he was gone, leaving Arthur fuming and me awash in a sea of swirling emotions. Had I just made a terrible mistake by not dismissing him immediately? Or was this an opportunity for our family to finally heal? Only time would tell. But the turmoil had begun again, emerging from the ashes of our past feuds. I could only pray that this time, things would unfold differently. I spent a restless night, tossing and turning, Jasper's pleas echoing endlessly in my mind. Arthur's furious objections clashed like cymbals against my desire to help my son. By morning, a dull headache had taken root. "You're not actually considering giving that snake any money, are you?" Arthur's voice sliced through my thoughts as I slowly sipped my coffee. I looked up at him tiredly. "Arthur, he's our flesh and blood. Yes, he's made terrible mistakes." "Mistakes?" he snapped. "That's putting it mildly. He turned his back on us when he needed us most, and now that the shoe's on the other foot, he has the audacity to come crawling back?" I set down my mug, struggling against the lump forming in my throat. "I can't let him fail, Arthur. Not without at least trying to help him get back on track." "Are you kidding me, Marlene? After how he treated us?" Arthur shook his head in disbelief. "That money's for our retirement, for our family." My hands trembled as I wrung them together. I knew Arthur's objections were valid. Jasper hadn't earned an ounce of trust from us after his deplorable actions years ago. But the ache of a mother's love doesn't simply vanish, no matter how deep the betrayal. "It's my money, too," I said softly. "And I have to try, Arthur. I have to." The muscle in Arthur's jaw clenched as he grappled with my decision. We'd always stood as a united front in the past. But not this time. 2 days later, Jasper returned, his eyes widening when I retrieved the envelope containing my life's savings. "You're doing the right thing, Mother," he said, a hint of his former warmth surfacing as he accepted the envelope. "This money will give my company a fighting chance." "That's $200,000, Jasper," Arthur said sternly. "This isn't a loan we can afford to go unpaid." Jasper's gaze met his father's head-on. "You don't have to worry about that. This business means everything to me. I'll make you proud, you'll see." I wanted so desperately to believe those words. Jasper had been such a driven, ambitious young man before his ego and arrogance led him astray. Perhaps this really could be his path to redemption. He turned to face me, his expression solemn. "I mean it, Mom. I'm going to make this right and be the son you deserve." Tears stung my eyes as I nodded, unable to find my voice. Pulling me into a tight embrace, Jasper whispered urgently in my ear, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I held him tightly, praying I'd done the right thing by placing my faith and fortune in my son's hands once more. Over the next few weeks, updates from Jasper came sporadically. The money had allowed him to pay down his debts, invest in new equipment for the business, and even hire some additional staff. He sounded more energized than I'd heard him in years. Yet Arthur's skepticism lingered like a dark cloud, no matter how rosy Jasper's reports appeared. "How long until we get the next call for money?" he grumbled one evening. "I just have a bad feeling about this, Marlene." I set my book aside, mustering my courage. "Then we'll deal with that if it happens. But for now, we have to have faith that our son has learned from his mistakes." 3 months after that fateful reunion, our doorbell rang once again. I felt my pulse quicken as I rose to answer it, Arthur close behind me. Jasper stood there grinning, dressed in a dapper suit I didn't recognize. My heart swelled with a sense of pride. My son was flourishing, just as he'd promised. "Mom, Dad," he started, his grin widening, "I have incredible news to share with you both." For a fleeting moment, it felt like my son, the bright, charismatic young man I'd raised, had fully returned to us. I allowed myself to bask in that feeling, clinging to the hope that finally our family could find healing and redemption. But fate had other plans in store for us. Jasper's incredible news would soon come crashing down like a ton of bricks, shattering that hope into a million pieces. Jasper's incredible news turned out to be a new investor he'd brought on to expand the business even further. While I felt a surge of pride at his apparent success, Arthur remained guarded. "Don't get too excited just yet," he muttered after Jasper left. "The other shoe's gonna drop with that boy." I brushed off Arthur's concerns, relieved that our son seemed to finally be getting his life in order, until one day, about 2 months later, when a troubling discovery shattered my blinders of motherly optimism. I was gardening in the backyard when I noticed Arthur's car wasn't in the driveway. Strange, he hadn't mentioned any plans to go out. I stepped back inside and noticed his wallet lying on the kitchen counter, his license and card still tucked inside. My heart skipped a beat as realization struck me. Arthur must have taken the car somewhere unplanned. But where and why? Suddenly uneasy, I quickly dialed his number. No answer. I paced anxiously around the living room, muttering frantic prayers under my breath that nothing was amiss. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the front door opened. Arthur shuffled in, his face drained of color. "Arthur, where on earth did you go? I was worried sick." He looked up at me with hollow eyes. I went to check on Jasper's business, to see for myself how it was doing." I felt the blood drain from my face as Arthur's hands began to tremble. "He's not running any business, Marlene. That money—" "Our money, it's gone." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the gut. Gone? How could it possibly be gone already? We'd given him every chance. "What do you mean, gone?" I stammered, gripping Arthur's arm. "Gone where?" Arthur sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "Jasper cleared out the office space, laid off whatever staff he had left. The business is defunct, and that investor he brought in, there never was one." White-hot anger surged through me, intermingled with the gut-wrenching sting of betrayal. How could my own son have lied and deceived us like this? After everything we'd sacrificed to give him that second chance? I stormed toward the hallway, grabbing my purse and keys. Arthur sprang up to block my path. "Marlene, wait! Where are you going?" To get some damn answers, I spat, trying to push past him. That ungrateful, deceptive little snake is going to feel a mother's wrath like he's never... And then what? Arthur shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. You really think he's going to listen to reason? He's gone too far again, Marlene. Don't you see? This time he's burned the bridge for good. I halted in my tracks, hot tears streaming down my cheeks. Arthur was right. There was no reasoning left with Jasper, not after this unforgivable deception. How could he do this to us? I wept, collapsing into Arthur's arms. All that money? Our security? How could our own son betray us like this? With each anguished sob, my heart shattered further. The visions of Jasper's redemption, of our family healing, disintegrated into the harsh reality of his selfishness and greed. We don't know what he blew the money on, Arthur said grimly, his embrace tightening around me. But I guarantee you it wasn't for any business. Of course, the fancy suit, the grand boasts of investors and expansions, it all made sense now. The true nature of Jasper's deception finally laid bare before us. Suddenly, a bright red rage replaced the shards of my broken heart. I pulled back from Arthur, my eyes narrowing. Where does he live? I want to hear it from his own despicable mouth. Arthur studied my face, a flicker of trepidation in his eyes, but he knew there was no calming this maelstrom of fury now. He retrieved his keys from the counter. You're not going alone, I'm coming with you. I nodded curtly. We were a team, a united front, and we were going to ensure our son faced the ultimate consequences for his unforgivable betrayal. The drive to Jasper's apartment seemed to stretch into an eternity. My hands clenched into tight fists, nails digging into my palms as waves of rage crashed within me. Arthur remained silent, his jaw locked in a grim expression. When we finally arrived, I wasted no time storming up to Jasper's door and hammering my fist against it forcefully. Jasper, open up this door right now, I yelled, my voice shaking with scarcely controlled fury. Arthur placed a firm hand on my shoulder, anchoring me. After several agonizing moments, the door swung open. Jasper stood there clad in a bathrobe, his hair disheveled. What's with all the... His eyes widened as he registered Arthur and I standing there. Oh, hey guys, what's going on? I took a step forward, poking my finger into his chest. Don't play dumb with me, you ungrateful snake. Where is our money? Jasper's brow furrowed in mock confusion. What are you talking about? The money's been put to good use rebuilding the business. Liar, I bellowed, feeling Arthur's grip tighten around my arm. We know there is no business. You took every last cent and blew it on yourself. For a split second, Jasper's facade cracked, revealing the snarling, venomous creature lurking beneath. But just as quickly, it was replaced by a snide, condescending smirk. And what if I did? He sneered, folding his arms across his chest defiantly. It was my money to do with as I pleased. I recoiled as if he'd slapped me across the face. Your money? That was our life savings, you arrogant little leech. How dare you? Arthur stepped between us, his shoulders squared. That's enough, Jasper. You better start being straight with us before this gets any uglier. Jasper scoffed loudly, rolling his eyes. Get off your high horse, old man. This is what you two backward fools get for trusting me in the first place. His hurtful words felt like a swift kick to the gut. How could my own son hurl such venom and contempt at us? The little boy I'd loved and nurtured was truly, unequivocally gone. You think I was going to let you control me? Keep me shackled to your pathetic small-town life? Jasper's voice steadily rose as he ranted. That money was my freedom, my golden ticket. No more lectures about responsibility or hard work from you two relics. Tears of outrage stung my eyes as he continued to castigate and humiliate us. Arthur squeezed my hand with reassurance, but said nothing. He saw the truth now, too. Our son was long gone. So yeah, I blew it all living my best life, Jasper shouted with a twisted grin. Designer clothes, fancy clubs, gorgeous women, everything I deserved, but you idiots tried to deny me. And you'll be hearing from my lawyer about trying to harass me. He took an aggressive step forward, forcing Arthur back. Now get off my property before I call the cops. I stared at him in stunned disbelief, this vile, inhuman creature wearing my son's face. Everything I thought I knew about him, every stupid pipe dream about his redemption, lay shattered in a million pieces. As we turned to leave, Jasper hurled one final vicious insult. That's right. Walk away like the cowards you've always been. I'm well rid of you both. Something inside me snapped in that moment. I pivoted back, hands trembling as I fought the urge to lash out violently. Don't you dare try to contact us again, I shouted, mustering every ounce of strength I could find. You are dead to me, Jasper, dead and buried. With those searing words, I sealed the fate of our relationship once and for all. My son was gone, swallowed by his own hubris and vile greed. Only a hollow, soulless monster remained. As Arthur and I retreated to the car, I stole one last mournful glance at the sneering face I'd brought into this world. Then I turned away, ignoring Jasper's bitter laughter echoing in my ears. There would be no more hoping, no more wishing for his comeback. I had finally accepted the harrowing truth about the person my son had become, and it cleaved my heart in two. In the weeks after my explosive confrontation with Jasper, a dark cloud seemed to perpetually loom over Arthur and me. The loss of our savings pierced us deeply, but it was the severing of family ties that truly shattered our hearts. I found little solace in anything. Not gardening, not my book club, not even Arthur's reassuring embraces. Jasper's treacherous words played on an endless loop in my mind, each venomous syllable a fresh wound. It was a struggle to find motivation most days. What was the point, when the child I'd sacrificed so much for had metaphorically spat in my face and danced on my heart? Arthur tried valiantly to be supportive, but even he couldn't mask his own simmering resentment toward our son's unforgivable actions. We were drifting apart in our shared grief. Then, one crisp October morning, a sharp rapping at the door shattered the gloomy pall surrounding us. "Were you expecting someone?" Arthur mumbled, barely glancing up from the newspaper. I shook my head no, rising to my feet with a resigned sigh. Unexpected visitors held little appeal these days, but when I pulled open the door, it wasn't a guest standing there. It was Mrs. Wilkins from next door, her face etched with frantic concern. "Marlene! Oh, thank heavens you're home," she gasped, grasping my hands tightly. "I'm just sick about this whole awful situation." My brow furrowed in confusion. "Mrs. Wilkins, what in the world are you talking about?" She opened her mouth to respond, but her eyes suddenly welled with tears. "Oh, you poor dear. You really don't know, do you?" A knot formed in the pit of my stomach as Arthur appeared beside me, his own expression one of bewilderment. "What's this about, Marlene? What's going on?" Mrs. Wilkins took a deep, shuddering breath to collect herself. When she finally spoke, her voice was grim. "It's this dreadful scam that's been going on, with the home repair company." She looked from Arthur to me imploringly, silently willing one of us to put the pieces together. Then, like a ton of bricks, realization struck me. Over the past couple of months, I'd overheard whispers around the neighborhood about shady dealings with a local contractor, shoddy work, incomplete jobs, and in some cases outright theft from elderly residents who'd hired them for home repairs. Arthur and I had dismissed the stories as gossip and rumor, but now with Mrs. Wilkins all but confirming the suspicions. "You mean someone's been scamming people?" Arthur exclaimed, the color visibly draining from his face. "Here in our neighborhood?" Mrs. Wilkins nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid so. The Hendersons up the street were the latest victims. That nice couple was absolutely robbed blind by those con artists." My heart sank as she continued, detailing the escalating crimes that had been sweeping through our community. How had we been so oblivious while our neighbors suffered? "We've got to do something," I declared, surprising even myself with the intensity in my voice. The first spark of purpose I'd felt in weeks suddenly ignited within me. Arthur cast me a hesitant sidelong glance, but I shot him a look that brooked no argument. Our family drama would have to be put on hold. Protecting our neighborhood took priority. Mrs. Wilkins grasped my hands again. "That's why I'm here, Marlene. A group of us are getting together later to start organizing. To figure out how to stop this dreadful scam before anyone else gets hurt." She looked at me earnestly. "We could really use your help." For a fleeting instant, I almost demurred, feeling weighed down by the emotional turmoil Jasper had inflicted upon me. But then I caught the unmistakable glint of fear in Mrs. Wilkins' eyes, fear of becoming the next victim herself. It was that look that strengthened my resolve. I drew myself up to my full height and gave a firm nod. "Of course I'll help. Just tell me what I need to do." As Mrs. Wilkins outlined the plans, I could feel Arthur's skeptical stare burning a hole through me. But I didn't care. This purposeful course of action was the lift I needed to escape my mire of despair. Little did I know, this scheme plaguing my beloved community was just the tip of the iceberg. And before long, Jasper's misdeeds would form an inextricable link that threatened to pull me under completely. Mrs. Wilkins' neighborhood watch group proved to be the spark I needed to regain my sense of purpose. Suddenly, I had a worthy mission to pour my energy into that went beyond wallowing in Jasper's betrayal. We began systematically investigating the trail of victims left in the scammer's wake. Through hushed conversations and anonymous tips, a disturbing pattern emerged. All of the targets were elderly residents who had hired the same shadowy contractor for home repairs. "It's like they're deliberately preying on the most vulnerable," Arthur grumbled one evening as we pored over the evidence we'd gathered. I felt a swell of righteous indignation. To exploit the defenseless in such a cruel, calculating manner, it was diabolical. Mrs. Wilkins' sources eventually traced the scam operation to a rundown office space on the outskirts of town. Summing my courage, I decided to take matters into my own hands. "Where are you going?" Arthur exclaimed as I grabbed my coat. "You're not thinking of going there alone, are you?" I shot him a challenging look. "These crooks have terrorized our neighborhood for too long. It's time they were stopped for good." Before Arthur could protest further, I was out the door and en route to the scammer's lair. Part of me knew how reckless my actions were, but the blinding drive for justice propelled me forward. When I arrived at the dingy office building, my heart pounded in my ears. Cautiously, I pulled open the glass door and peered inside. "Can I help you?" I nearly jumped out of my skin at the gruff voice. A burly man in a grease-stained shirt eyed me suspiciously. Scrambling to maintain my composure, I cleared my throat. I was told this was the office for home repair services?" The man's expression remained unreadable. "What kind of job you need done?" "Oh, just some routine maintenance," I stammered, cursing my inability to craft a more convincing ruse. "Kitchen appliances, windows, that sort of thing." He grunted and jerked his head toward a hallway. "My boss's office is down that way. Let him know what you need." My mouth went dry as I hesitantly ventured further inside. Was this finally the break we'd been seeking? A chance to confront the scammers directly? After a few tense moments, I reached the office door the man had indicated. Taking a steadying breath, I rapped my knuckles against it firmly. "Enter," a muffled voice barked. "Here goes nothing," I thought as I twisted the doorknob. I was utterly unprepared for the sight that awaited me on the other side. Seated behind a scarred metal desk strewn with papers was none other than my own son, Jasper. His icy glare bored straight through me. "You've got some nerve showing up here," he spat, vitriol dripping from every syllable. I could only gape at him, frozen in stunned disbelief. How was this remotely possible? Jasper seemed to read the question in my eyes as his piercing gaze flickered with dark amusement. "What's the matter, Mother? You look surprised to see your own flesh and blood." Slowly, with horrifying clarity, the pieces began falling into place. The scam preying on the neighborhood's vulnerable seniors, the shadowy contractor who disappeared without a trace after fleecing its victims. It was Jasper. He had masterminded this entire crooked operation to fund his lavish indulgences. And in my blind determination to fight for justice, I had unwittingly walked straight into the viper's nest. "You," I choked out, my throat constricting with rage and revulsion. "How could you stoop so low, robbing and terrorizing these poor people?" Jasper threw his head back and loosed a contemptuous cackle. "Save the self-righteous speeches, Mother. This is just good business, preying on the weak to deliver what they so foolishly ask for." His words sliced through me like razor-sharp daggers. To hear him so casually dehumanize and dismiss his victims. "You're sick," I seethed, clenching my fists against the urge to lash out physically. "Just completely sick and depraved." In the blink of an eye, Jasper was on his feet, his face contorted in an animalistic snarl of fury. "No more than the pathetic welch who kept me shackled all those years." He stabbed an accusing finger toward me. "This is the payback I deserved after your betrayal." The heated venom in his voice shattered my restraint. Before I could stop myself, I spat a gob of saliva squarely into his face. "You evil, ungrateful bastard!" Jasper's roar of outrage shook the walls. As his meaty hands seized me by the shoulders, a primal panic finally kicked in. With strength I didn't know I possessed, I broke free and sprinted for the exit, Jasper's unhinged screams of, "You'll regret this," ringing in my ears. I burst through the front door, Jasper's furious shouts still echoing in my ears. My heart pounded violently as I stumbled to my car, hands shaking uncontrollably. The engine roared to life and I peeled out of the parking lot, fixated solely on putting as much distance between myself and that wretched place as possible. It wasn't until I'd turned several blocks away that the fog of panic began to lift. That's when the full, sickening reality of what I'd witnessed truly crashed over me. My own son, my flesh and blood, was the vile, depraved mastermind behind the scam that had been terrorizing our community, exploiting and stealing from the most vulnerable among us with no shred of remorse. Hot bile burned in my throat as I recalled the sadistic glee on Jasper's face, the way he'd sneered at my revulsion over his crimes. This wasn't just about greed anymore. He seemed to derive genuine pleasure from wreaking havoc and misery on others. The monster I'd caught a glimpse of that terrible day outside his apartment had fully metastasized. Any lingering shred of humanity was gone, leaving behind a twisted, evil husk. I can't be sure how long I drove around aimlessly, tears of rage and disgust blinding my vision. But eventually, I found myself pulling into the driveway, numb and emotionally spent. Arthur met me at the door, his eyes widening at my haggard, ashen appearance. "Marlene? What in God's name happened? Where have you been?" The dam of pent-up emotion burst apart as I collapsed into his arms, heaving great, ragged sobs. In fragmented sentences, I recounted the nightmarish scene I'd witnessed, the scammer's base of operations, and the person orchestrating the entire fiendish enterprise. I saw him, Arthur," I choked out between racking cries. "At the office. It was Jasper, leading the whole thing." Arthur froze, his jaw dropping in stunned silence. I didn't have to specify which him I meant, we both knew. The profane, guttural roar that erupted from my husband's throat startled even me. His face flushed crimson, veins bulging on his neck. "That little bastard!" Arthur bellowed, spit flying from his lips. "I'll kill him! I'll wring his scrawny little neck!" I shrank back, scarcely able to process this unhinged side of my husband I'd never witnessed. Decades of bottled fury and anguish over our son's actions had finally reached an explosive boiling point. "Get in the car!" he barked, seizing me by the wrists with surprising force. "You're taking me to that weasel's hole right now." "Arthur, no," I protested, trying to wrench away. "We can't. Not like this. We need to call the police, turn over the evidence." "Evidence?" he spat, dragging me inexorably toward the driveway. "All the evidence I need is the blood on my hands after I strangle that degenerate filth." My pleas fell on deaf ears as Arthur shoved me into the passenger seat and peeled out, mirrors forgotten. I watched in stunned horror as this side of him I didn't recognize took over, consumed by an insatiable primal thirst for vengeance. In my mind's eye, I could picture with terrifying clarity what would unfold if we returned to that scammer's den. Arthur would charge in without hesitation, ready to unleash years of pent-up rage upon our son. And Jasper, sadistic and utterly without conscience, would meet that fury with vicious, brutal violence of his own, undoubtedly armed and ready to defend his depraved empire. Somewhere deep in the recesses of my soul, I knew this path could only end in tragedy. Either Jasper or Arthur would likely wind up dead. And even if Arthur emerged victorious, his life would be irrevocably shattered. As much as I longed to see Jasper suffer the harshest penalties for his abhorrent crimes, I couldn't allow Arthur to sacrifice himself or his future in a fiery blaze of blind retribution. I had to be the voice of reason to prevent this from spiraling into an inescapable cycle of destruction. Praying I could reach whatever shred of lucidity still remained in Arthur's tormented psyche, I placed my trembling hand upon his white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel. "Arthur, please," I implored, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You have to listen to me. This isn't the way." In the aftermath of my chilling confrontation with Jasper, the only thing that stopped Arthur from charging headlong into a catastrophic collision course with our son was the authorities. I managed to get him to pull over long enough for me to call the police, relaying every harrowing detail in a trembling voice. Within the hour, squad cars swarmed the dingy office suite, catching Jasper and his lackeys completely off guard. He let forth a blistering torrent of curses and threats when the officers snapped the cuffs around his wrists, a final burst of defiance before his world came crashing down. As they hauled him away, Jasper fixed me with a look of pure, unsettling venom that still haunts me to this day. "This isn't over, you miserable hag," he hissed with chilling menace. "Not by a long shot." I shuddered, leaning into Arthur's embrace as we watched the parade of arrested scammers file into the police transports. In mere minutes, the office space was cleared out, leaving only the haphazard remnants of their illicit operation scattered about. "It's over," Arthur mumbled, seeming to deflate as the momentary adrenaline rush ebbed away. "Our son is finally going to face justice." I wanted desperately to share in that relief, to fully embrace the burden being lifted from our lives. But Jasper's venomous parting words rang in my mind on an endless, unsettling loop. His threats, however hollow, hinted at a deeper unraveling of his psyche, one that instilled a lingering sense of dread in the pit of my stomach. In the ensuing weeks, we cooperated fully with prosecutors, determined to see Jasper and his cohorts put behind bars for the maximum sentences possible. The sheer volume of evidence they gathered, surveillance footage, financial records, and heart-wrenching victim testimony, painted a damning portrait of a sophisticated criminal syndicate. As Jasper's trial date approached, I found my thoughts increasingly consumed not with anger, but with an overpowering sense of sorrow. How had the bright-eyed, ambitious little boy I'd raised become this remorseless, soulless monster? Where had I gone wrong in leading him down such a path of wickedness and depravity? Arthur steadfastly maintained his self-assurance that Jasper's downfall was the justly deserved reckoning for his misdeeds. But I couldn't shake my anguish at this tragic unraveling of a life filled with such potential. The trial itself was a brutal affair, an agonizing crucible of seeing the full extent of Jasper's crimes rendered in exacting detail. I struggled to maintain my composure as the prosecuting attorneys methodically dismantled any remaining virtuous facade he tried to hide behind. In the end, Jasper was found guilty on a staggering litany of charges: racketeering, money laundering, defrauding the elderly, and so much more. The judge wasted no time in handing down a sentence befitting his reprehensible actions. "For your complete disregard of human decency and the laws of society," the judge declared, his voice booming with indignant fury, "this court hereby sentences you to 30 years in a federal penitentiary." The courtroom explosive erupted with cheers at the harsh punishment. Through the thunderous din, I couldn't tear my eyes away from Jasper as the sentencing sank in. He didn't rage or lash out as I expected. Instead, his face contorted in an expression of pure malice as his gaze met mine from across the room. When the echo from the judge's gavel finally faded, Jasper leaned toward me with a sinister sneer. "I'll see you in hell, Mother," he mouthed slowly, chillingly accentuating each syllable. I shuddered, grateful for Arthur's steadying grip on my shoulder. Jasper was led away in disgrace, but his haunting vow lingered like a suffocating miasma, a final, visceral reminder of the depravity he'd descended into. In the months after, the road toward healing and acceptance proved a long, arduous journey, fraught with guilt, anger, and second-guessing myself at every turn. Jasper's downward spiral had rent our family asunder in the most painful way imaginable. Yet through it all, one profound epiphany emerged from the ashes: the understanding that we alone weren't to blame for the person Jasper had become. His destruction was a path of his own making, built upon a bedrock of greed, ego, and moral decay we could never have steered him away from. Our family's name may have been shattered beyond repair by his callous misdeeds, but the shackles of guilt no longer weighed me down as I moved forward, resolved to forge a new legacy of decency and purpose in the wake of Jasper's ruination. Then, on a crisp autumn day nearly a year after our son's sentencing, a tattered envelope arrived in the mail, the return address a federal corrections facility. My heart skipped a beat as I tore it open with trembling hands, Arthur watching me intently. The contents, a hastily scrawled letter in Jasper's unmistakable hand, left me awash in a torrent of emotions I'll never forget. "Mother and Father, by the time you read this, I'll be safely tucked away to pay for my crimes against you, our family, and society. I can't undo the hurt and destruction I've caused, no matter how much I may wish I could turn back the clock.